I've been thinking a lot about the rumored Ocarina of Time remake. When you look online at the videos discussing the remake, a lot of them discuss and talk about how the original game is a masterpiece. And this is something that I agree with. I think that the original Ocarina of Time is an incredible game and holds up very well even to this day. The game is so charming, the atmosphere is amazing, the story is impactful, and the game design is pretty great. Someone could play Ocarina of Time today and have it be just as impactful as it was back when it was originally released. Now, because of this, you might be inclined to think that the correct direction for the remake would be to keep it as similar as possible to the original version. A lot of people online that I've seen have said the best direction would be to slightly modernize the controls and then to do a huge overhaul of the visuals and call it a day there. What I think, though, is that although Ocarina of Time is a masterpiece, we need to drastically overhaul a ton of the game. But not because these aspects need to be improved, I just think The Legend of Zelda, with its history of being such a hugely innovative game series, deserves to have a remake that's just as creative and innovative as Ocarina of Time was when it first came out. When Ocarina of Time was first released, it was one of the first games of its kind. Developers were trying to figure out how to bring 2D games into a 3D space, and Ocarina of Time nailed it. I won't spend a ton of time talking about what the original game did well, because it's been stated and discussed over and over and over again by thousands of people. But the innovations that it brought to the series and into gaming as a whole were incredible. While its impact on the gaming industry was monumental, I think Ocarina of Time will always be remembered by people on a much more personal basis. So many people can remember playing the game for the first time, no matter what age they were, and the game having an impact on them. I remember the first time I put my father's copy of Ocarina of Time into our Nintendo 64 in the basement, flipping the switch to turn it on and seeing the intro for the first time, and watching the opening cutscene. I was just about 5 years old then, but I still remember the emotions that I felt from what I was seeing on screen. It wasn't until I was 11 years old that I actually tried playing through the whole game for the first time and beating it. It felt like a huge accomplishment. As I stated above, the world that the developers created was so ahead of its time. It felt so real and it was such a treat to explore. So to state what I think about the remake clearly, I think Ocarina of Time is a masterpiece, but it's one that we can already play. If we're going to revisit the story and the game and this world, I think an ambitious remake that heavily changes aspects of the game is what the game needs and deserves. So what exactly do I mean by this? I want to go through each aspect of the game and detail what it is I think should be changed or kept the same. First, visuals. We'll start with visuals because I think that's the one thing across the board that most people believe should be updated. While I think what they did for the 3DS port of the game worked well for the time, I think the game should go for a style much different than what we see in the Nintendo 64 version or the 3DS version. I've seen a few people say this, that the game should try to emulate the original concept art for the game. However, I don't think that it should be cel-shaded. I want to see what the Nintendo Switch 2 can do graphically, and so I think that this should be a very graphically intense game and act somewhat as a showcase for what the Nintendo Switch 2 is capable of. We know that it's capable of higher frame rates, good image quality, thanks to DLSS, and even ray tracing, and so I'd like to see them really push the Switch 2 to its limits, while also maintaining good performance. A lot of people have been pointing at this tech demo that's on screen right now as for a style that they'd like to see emulated in this remake, potentially. And while I kind of agree, I lean more towards wanting a style that we've kind of never seen before in the series. Something that's similar to the original game, and maybe the concept art, but also something that's kind of different than what we've seen. I just hope that Nintendo surprises us and that we're all blown away and super thrilled by how this game looks. Next, I wanted to talk about the music. Music is the other thing that I think should stay mostly the same. The music in the original game is masterpiece level, and so you don't want to do too much to change it. I do think that all the music should be re-recorded, definitely done by, Nintendo's in-house orchestra. And I also think that for some tracks, there might be opportunity to extend the length of some of the songs. Other than that, the music did so much to establish the tone and the atmosphere of the original game, so you wouldn't want to mess with it too much. I also do think that there is some opportunity to create new tracks for the game, but that ties into the next section that I want to talk about: story. I think the story and the way it's originally told in the Nintendo 64 version is done really well, and I think it's quite impactful. That being said, I think that there are a few things that they can do or adjust to make the story really interesting, especially for people who have played the game many times through already. First, I'll talk about things that can be adjusted from the original. I think that the game needs full voice acting. This is something that we've never had in a Zelda game before, and I think it would do a lot of good for the presentation of the story to have full voice acting both in cutscenes and during gameplay. I also think that we need some other sections to keep things interesting, things that weren't in the original game at all. I've always found it interesting in games when you play as a character that's different from the main character for a little portion of the game. And I think that Ocarina of Time really lends itself to including a section or two of something like this. The obvious inclusion would be a Sheik section, potentially something during the time when Link was sealed away in the Temple of Time. I also think that you could have a section where you play as, I don't know, a Goron or a Zora potentially. I think we need additions to the game that help flesh out the story and provide original players of the game with plenty of surprises throughout. I also wouldn't be opposed to slight modifications in the story. I think this would keep us on our toes and keep us not really knowing what to expect. I also just think that the presentation of the world and the characters can also be changed to help support the story a little better. Hyrule Field felt very empty in the original, so why not flesh it out with maybe some little towns or huts and characters that you see when you're young, and then when you see them when you're older, the towns and, places that people live have been destroyed and ravaged when you're older. Things like that could really help with the story without really changing the core of the story and all of the story beats. Lastly, I wanted to talk about gameplay. I think this is the area of the game that needs the most updates and improvements. I mean, this game came out like 20 years ago, and improvements to games, as far as how they feel and play, have been so vast and so numerous. I think the original game and the combat was quite easy and basic, and I feel like this can be said for a lot of Zelda games. A lot of the combat is just press B to attack, without much more nuance than that. I think they could make great strides here to improve the combat in a remake. I'd like to see something where, we're using the tools that we get and better utilizing them as weapons during enemy combat. Or, maybe we have something like a dodge roll or a parry. I'm not saying that this needs to be Dark Souls, but I want something a little deeper, and I want to feel like a warrior. I enjoyed the combat in Breath of the Wild, but even that feels a little spammy to me. And so many of the battles can be won just by cheesing the enemies. I want battles in this game to feel intense, because that's how they should feel based on the story the game is trying to tell. I also think that there should be more enemies as well. Maybe not new species, but take the existing species and make new versions of them to spice up the combat a little bit. In addition to combat, I also want to talk about just kind of minute-to-minute gameplay. As you're exploring the kingdom and looking for things to do. A lot of people are worried that the game will play like Breath of the Wild because it's reported that the game is being developed in the Breath of the Wild engine, but I don't think it really will. I feel like the game will mostly be not necessarily linear, but have a linear structure to it. And so I feel like people don't need to worry about this game being, like an open world type game. But I also do think that the game should contain more things to do. Add more lakes and streams around the world and let me fish in them. Add wildlife that you can study and hunt. Add more missions. The core gameplay should be the same, exploring and solving puzzles, but I just want to see everything expanded greatly. Whatever this game looks like, or if it even exists, it seems like we'll have to wait until June to see it and hear about it. And so I want to know, are you excited about the potential remake of Ocarina of Time? What do you want to see in a remake of this game? Let me know in the comments, and we'll see you next week.